Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for joining the Civics Outreach 2021 training series. Today, we're going to talk about how search works. We'll give it a few minutes until 3 p.m. to get started, but thanks so much for joining. Grab a glass of water, grab your notebook, grab a pen, and we'll get started in a couple of minutes. Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining our first training of the year for our Civics Outreach webinar series. Today, we're going to be talking about how search works, and we're joined by some very special guests. We'll get started in just a few minutes, so make sure you grab water, grab your notebook and a pen. Make sure you jot down some of those questions. There's a question box right below, so make sure you put your questions there all throughout our chat. We'll be monitoring and be able to answer your questions at the end of the presentations. Also, make sure you have your phone handy. We're going to do some interactive activities on this webinar, so just make sure you have that. There's going to be a QR code for you to scan, and it's going to be some fun. So sit back, relax. We're going to get started in a few minutes. All right, now that everybody's had a chance to settle in, we'll get started. First, so we have the wonderful Danny Sullivan, who will be giving us a rundown of how search works. He's Google's public search liaison and knows everything and anything about search. So get ready for some question and answer with him and some really great nuggets of knowledge. I'm also joined by my colleague, Javier Hernandez, who is going to take us through some of the ways that you can establish your presence on search. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay. All right, so how search works is what we're covering today. So just a quick agenda. We're going to go over how you can set up secure Google accounts as a team. We know that starting a new Congress, maybe you're starting at a new organization in the new year, we want to make sure that your accounts are set up in the best way possible. Then we're going to talk about how you and your organization can appear in Google search. And then our special treat of the day, how search works by our very own Danny Sullivan. All right, let's kick it off. First, setting up secure Google accounts as a team. All right, so we all know that we have different accounts for different reasons on our both personal side and our official side accounts. So right here, you see 3 different accounts that you might have. First, of course, your comms team account, your Google account for your entire office, that shared account that you can get between different staffers, kind of that, Smith comms at yourofficial.gov or yourorganization.org, that account that kind of stays with the organization. Typically, we recommend that you use that to claim your knowledge panel, manage your YouTube channel, run Google ads, anything that would be a shared function of your organization. And we'll make sure to talk about that in a little bit, why that's so important. The next account that you might have is just your personal account for your job. So, Maria, John at smithcampaign.org or something like that is what you might have for yourself. For that, I implore you to manage your Google Drive, create Google Docs to share with your colleagues, also going on Google Meet or Hangouts, something that you can do with that personal staffer account. And then your last account, your Google account, your Gmail. That's things that you use for personal use. I recommend using that for Gmail, Drive, watching YouTube videos, all that kind of stuff. So really, these 3 types of accounts serve different purposes. We want to make sure that you have enhanced security for all these accounts. So on a shared comms account, really make sure that you have those passwords stored in a password manager, something that is not a spreadsheet, but really something that anyone in your organization can safely log into and that's secure. Something like Google Password Manager, LastPass, something that can keep everything safe and secure. Then your individual staffer account, we recommend that 2-step verification. And I also recommend that for your Gmail accounts as well, just because, we do a lot of sensitive work in the civic space. So we want to make sure that both of those accounts are secure. You never know when somebody might be trying to get into your account and they can have access from any different point of entry. So you want to make sure that those accounts are safe and secure. So here are some resource links for a shared Google account. It's really important that you have all these security measures on each of your accounts, but you also think about the longevity of your organization and how your accounts can move on just in case you might leave the organization. So I want to ask you a question, and this is on Slido. So all you have to do is take your phone, hold it up to the camera with the QR code, and you should be able to answer the question right here. I see that some people have already done that, already answered the question. So I'm going to hold it up too, and I'm going to answer the question. Let's see where people are. Okay. Ooh, I see some more yeses. Okay, we're changing. Amazing. I'm happy to see the no's go down. We'll give everybody a second to just, get their thing up on their phone. It's a great way to, kind of see where you guys are at. I'm also really happy to see all these yeses. Having just a shared Google account for your office is something that's so important. So you see the other two options here. No, our accounts are tied to a staffer's organization account, kind of your work email, or no, our accounts are tied to a staffer's personal Gmail. If that's the case for any of you, feel free to reach out to us at civics-outreach@google.com. We're happy to help you kind of navigate how to change that to a shared Google account, make sure that your YouTube channel's there, your knowledge panel, all of those things that should probably stay with your organization. So that's really important to do. So if you might have answered no to this question, feel free to reach out to us and we're happy to help you make sure that you have that shared Google account. But I'm very encouraged to see that over half of you answered yes to this question. So bravo. Okay. All right. So appearing in Google search. Stay on Slido because I have another question for you. When you think of Google search, what do you think of? I already see some things here. Information. Amazing. Okay. It should have stayed on the screen if you stayed on Slido. So it should have changed to when you think of Google search, what do you think of? And you can just enter a word there. Whatever word comes to your mind, first one that pops in your head. Fast. Okay. Great. Privacy. Awesome. What other words do we think of? Crowded. Search. Convenient. Yes, very convenient. You have an answer at your fingertips. Helpful. Yes. Ooh, somebody else said information. It's really fun to have a word cloud. Let's see what else we have here. Targeted ads. Research. Frustrating but useful. Okay, we can talk more about that. Somebody else said convenient. Data. Let's see. Tracking. Okay. It seems like information and convenient are two words that we really associate with Google search. Another fast. Okay. Reliable. Tailored search. Okay. Wonderful. Well, I'm happy to hear a lot of these words and we can dive deeper into what these all mean and, how, maybe if you think it's scary, I see here, we can talk about that as well. So all of these things are things that come to mind when you think of Google search. But how do you actually appear on Google search? And what can you do in your organization to really maximize your presence on search? So I'm going to invite Javi back into the conversation, and he's going to walk us through exactly how to do that from a civics angle. Javi, I think you might be muted.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Maria, thanks so much. Yeah, I would love to take it over. If anyone's used Google search, and it seems like from all the responses in the poll, most folks are very familiar with it. That when you're in the market for some information, you want to know what year, how old your favorite celebrity is, what college they went to, what some background information on an established public figure. Oftentimes you go to Google to get that information in a really succinct and easy to access way. And the way that happens is through knowledge panels, right? Most of you are probably very familiar when you search up that public figure that you're curious about, you'll see what appears on the screen here, which is a collection of information that Google has kind of aggregated from publicly available information across the web to make it very easy to find those most relevant pieces of information about those individuals. As you think about search, and you think about the ads that may appear at the top of search, organic search results that may appear below that. If you're on desktop, you'll see the knowledge panel appear off on the right with all that helpful information, or on mobile, you'll see it kind of worked into above the organic search results. So how do you make sure that for your bosses and your organization, that information is appearing accurately on search? So there are a couple. The one thing that you want to make sure that you're doing is that you're claiming your knowledge panel. Through the claiming process, you're able to establish yourself as the authoritative source of information for this entity. And you'll see that claim your knowledge panel button off on the bottom right. That's how you're going to initiate that process. The moment that you log into your shared Google account, your organization's or office's shared Google account, and you click on that button, you're going to be taken to this page here. We're going to ask you to verify your identity, right? That you are the authoritative source of this information. So you just click on Get Verified, and then you'll have two options here. The first option you'll have is to you can associate a YouTube, Twitter, or Search Console account to your organization's name, and then we'll be able to verify you through that process once you're logged in and connected those two. The second option is if we can't verify your like your ownership of that entity, we're going to ask you to fill out a form so that we can get more information before we can verify your presence on search. And once that's done, you'll see a change occur to the knowledge panel itself. This is what an example of what a claim knowledge panel will look like. You'll see that the claim your knowledge panel button has now disappeared, and what you see is a feedback button that you can click on to make authoritative edits to the knowledge panel, suggestions to it that we'll review and then update of if it clears our obviously threshold for authoritative information. So you can all do this. Just make sure that you're claiming your boss's knowledge panel, making sure that all the information that appears there is going to be accurate and up to date. Just a quick reminder of a couple of the things that or I guess let's go to the suggestion portion. Yeah. So I'm going to walk you through some of the things that you're going to be able to suggest when you claim a knowledge panel. That can be anything from the featured image that you're going to see on the top right of that knowledge panel. That could be the name if you've been your boss has been married, or your organization has had a recent name change. Title, you can change birth year if it's incorrect, educational background, anything that might appear under associated with that person, like books. And for your purposes specifically, especially if you want to make sure that you're directing people to your social media channels when they search your office or organization, making sure that the social media links that appear there are correct and up to date, just to make sure that you're driving folks to the right destination. So moving on to those are just some of the details that you're able to change when you make those suggestions. After you make those changes, it's going to go through like a review process where we just want to make sure that any of the changes that are made to these knowledge panels are authoritative and not editorial, just to make sure that everything is publicly available, accurate, and all of that. So great. So here are just some resources that you all can utilize when you're thinking about claiming your bosses or organization's knowledge panel. We're gonna make these obviously publicly available on our resources website, so you can go back to these. We're also including a contact a knowledge panel team form. If you run into issues with the knowledge panel claiming process or issues with the knowledge panel itself, you're able to use this form to kind of get the support that you might need from the knowledge panel team. Great. And now another really important part of search. Knowledge panels will pop up whenever you search for a specific entity or organization name. Now, for a lot of folks, oftentimes like a key part of your operation is also directing folks to kind of the administrative side of your organization, making sure that there's a phone number that they can get a hold of, that they're aware of what your organization's office hours might be, stuff like that. And that's where Google My Business comes in. It allows you to establish yourself on search in a way that makes that information extremely readily available and convenient. So we're gonna talk about how to do that now. Great. So this is that you're seeing off on the right is again a Google My Business listing. So it appears very similar to how you saw in the knowledge panel example. This will include things, as I mentioned, the phone number to your organization, address to your organization, reviews if you've chosen to enable them, as well as just kind of like other really helpful logistical information. So you would want to make sure that you're keeping that up to date, particularly if you're providing services. I know now during COVID, a lot of folks have kind of shifted to a phone model or a online model. So you want to make sure that if you're not providing the same services you were providing previously, that you're making an update to those descriptions and the service levels in your Google My Business profile. So how do you able to do all of that? So you may have multiple different offices that you're managing, and you want to make sure that all the information that appears across each of those offices is correct, and you can do that by creating a business profile and then claiming that profile itself. And then that way you're able to make those changes as the authoritative owner of those listings across search. So moving on to the next slide. Great. And you're also able to do that from mobile. If you are someone who prefers if you're someone that prefers to make those updates just from the simplicity of your phone, you're able to do that by just downloading the Google My Business app, which is available in both Android and Apple devices. And you can download it off both the App Store or the Android Google Play Store, and right to your phone, so you can make those edits. And then just going on to some resources. These are just some things that you're going to be able to find following this presentation on how you can manage your Google My Business listings and make those suggestions. Again, there's going to be a process that you're going to have to go through, starting a Google business profile, entering the address of your organizations and name of organizations, linking them to your Google My Business account. But once you've done that, it's going to be a lot easier for you to manage the information that appears across that. So you can have both your knowledge panel with accurate information, as well as your Google My Business listing with all the accurate office information for your organization as well. So, yep, passing it back on to Maria.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Javi. If you have any questions, please drop them below in the chat. I actually already see one from Kat, which I'm actually going to kick to Danny when he joins me. So right now, we are so excited to introduce Danny Sullivan. He's Google's public search liaison, and he is a plethora of knowledge. If you've ever seen any of the public search liaison tweets or even tweets from Danny, you know that he knows his stuff. So Danny, I have a question here from Kat. She asks, does the knowledge panel look the same to everyone?
Look the same in terms of, yes. Yes, it's not going to change based on sort of who you are. I mean, it will change based on, say, your language and your location. So, you know, if you search for something in English, you're going to get it in English. If you search for it in Spanish and it's relevant, it would be all presented, say, in Spanish. That goes to the broader thing, too. A lot of people assume that the search results that you see are highly tailored or highly personalized. They're not. They're rarely personalized. And in fact, we have a new feature called About This Result, where you can click on the little 3 dots to any result that appears, and it'll tell you if it's personalized or not. And it will typically tell you that it's not. Sometimes people see a lot of changes in the search results and they go, well, why is it different for me and this other person? And it's usually because of localization, that someone's in a different city or a different country, but it's not personalization because everybody in that same location sees the same sort of things. And there's still a lot of commonality what they'll see as well. So we try to localize where it makes sense. You search for vaccine information, you kind of want vaccine information that's going to be near you, so it makes sense for that to be sort of localized. You search for things generally about, say, nutrition, then, you know, there's no sense to really do a lot of localization there.
Awesome. Thanks, Danny. It seems like it may be a little bit different based on where you are and what you've actually searched for. So that's helpful to know. All right. I do see one other question here from Jacob that we'll address just real quick before Danny gets started. He's got so much information for us. But Jacob, yes, the answer to your question, you can claim both the knowledge panel and the Google My Business profile for your member. And with the Google My Business profile, you can also claim DC and your district office as well. So all of those under one shared Google account. So that's why it's so important, and I talk about it at the top. Awesome. If I don't see any more questions, I'm going to kick it over to Danny. He's got so much knowledge to share. So without further ado, Danny Sullivan.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time today. I'm going to give you a lightning run through on how we do search. And of course, we have time for questions and answers after that, but hopefully this will answer a lot of basic stuff that people might have. So we are trying to understand all the world's information. And the way we do that typically is that we are trying to index it. You can think of what we do as creating a map of the internet or creating basically a big book of the internet. We go out, we're automatically visiting pages all across the web, and we bring those back and we index them, very similar to how there might be a big book of the internet, or a big book, and a book has an index, and you go through and you find which pages you're relevant to find in that book. But for us, the book of the web, if you will, it's trillions of pages. I think we estimate that if you printed them all out, it would go to the moon 12 times and back. And so when you search, we go through and we try to find the matching content that seems most relevant. And it's very complicated, and that search is much more than just web pages themselves. We're trying to organize the world's information, and not all the world's information is just on the web, although that's a big part of it. We're having to interact with things like videos and images and news articles. We're trying to bring in the ability for people to easily find facts and statistics or patents, scholarly paper. We are working with licensees and partnerships to bring in things like lyrics and weather information, sports score and authoritative data, or business feeds that are coming in, user information from maps, or even things that are out in the physical world like our street view mapping, or showing people where there's active wildfires. Well, both flowers and wildfires at the same time. Well, not at the same time, you can search for them both. Or flood forecasting. So we're trying to bring all this information and make it available. And to show you each of these kinds of information, we're trying to understand what's unique about them, what seems to be most relevant about them. Now, one of the big challenges when it comes through is that when people conduct a search, we have to try to understand what they're saying, and sometimes they give us very little information. So in this example, if you search for pancake, do you want to make pancakes? Do you want videos that show you how to do it? Are you asking if they're vegan, healthy types, just places that deliver them? So we have to try to understand this. And it's the equivalent as if you had gone to a library and went up to the librarian and said, pancake. And the librarian would be like, okay, you want to help me out here? And sometimes we can get that. Sometimes we have to kind of get it in other ways. So we can tell in some cases, like right now, if you were searching for cold weather, we might anticipate, there's a lot of cold weather going on. Maybe you want news. We can tell that that's sort of a fresh query. We might understand we probably should show more news stuff. If you're searching in a particular place, as I mentioned, we may understand that we should maybe show more locally relevant information if we detect it. If you've done a previous query, this is a case where we can use your previous query to almost like have a conversation. If you had searched for pancake and then you search for cooking, we might understand, wow, you're looking for pancakes and cooking, so maybe we should show our recipe box so that you can get a better idea of some recipes that are out there. Or if there's other words in your queries or the kind of language you're using, that can give us some clues as to better understanding what you're searching for. And then we have to rank this content using what we call signals, which are kind of clues to what seems to be most relevant. So like when you search for something and we can tell on a web page that it has the same words that you used, that's a signal that that page is perhaps relevant. If people are linking to that page and using those words in the links to the page, that's another signal that we use to understand, well, maybe that's relevant as well. Whereas if you are searching for images and we can understand that there may be some color or something you're there asking, and we can understand images has those colors, that might help us there. You're searching for news and we may understand that freshness is really important. And we try to understand who was sort of the original source of a particular article if there's a breaking news thing and show that. When it comes to local, the signals there we use are, what's the location of the business? What's your location? How do we kind of bring those together? Understanding ratings and reviews, hours. Or when it comes to videos, we're trying to understand, like, can we get text from the speech? Do we have any closed captioning information we can use? Because otherwise, we don't really know what's in a video without getting some of the textual information. The overall in all that is there are so many different signals. Some of these signals might not even make sense to a human being that we use to try to figure out what's the most relevant content to show. But we know that they correlate closely to what human beings actually find to be relevant. And that's what helps us figure out, okay, well, we're going to show you some recipes about pancakes, or or I think I had another slide there, kind of got missing there, or showing you local information that might be appearing, or other kinds of information that's there. Now, one thing I want to stress also is that we don't charge anybody to appear in our search results. We do have ads that appear in addition to search results in some cases. And when we do have ads, they're always labeled, but they don't have any influence on the search results. So you can buy an ad, you can not buy an ad. You can spend a ton of money with Google, you can spend no money with Google. It makes no difference to the team that builds and creates the search results, in the same way that typically with, say, newspapers, the ad department is going to be in one place, and the editorial department's in another, and they don't mix, and they don't really sort of care what each other kind of does with it from there. So I have good colleagues that work on ad stuff, and they do things, and I'm like, I don't know what you do, and you don't know what I do, and that's a very good thing. And lastly, by the way, we don't sell anybody's personal information. Sometimes that's said, it just doesn't happen. We don't sell that information to third parties at all. We simply sell ads that can appear. Now, one of the big challenges with search is that things continue to evolve. So if you're older like me, you might remember, 1998, you turned on your computer, the modem tone went, did all that sort of stuff. And then eventually you got connected and you did your search and you got your answers and they came back. And typically searching was something you had to sit at a computer in order to do, and you would think about it and go on. Today, people are searching all the time, 24/7, back of a bike, on their mobile devices and so on. And we have to continue to evolve to meet those kinds of needs. So when you would search in 2000 t-shirts, here's some web pages, here's some listings. In 2020, it's more like, here are some ways you can do shopping, or here are some ways that you can find the kind of t-shirt you're after, or here are information that's related. We're trying to show a variety of information. And in fact, the kinds of information and the kinds of third parties that we point to has become even more diverse over time. Another big change in the development of research is the evolution that's had to happen. In 2001, after 9/11, if you had gone to Google, we were terrible and basically said you need to go turn on your television, because we didn't really have the concept of a news search engine. Our search results were very stale. There was no good information for people to find. Now we're in 2020, and we're able to bring in breaking news and make it very relevant and very helpful to people within just a few minutes of something happening, and trying to get them the best information that's available. And that's part of the evolution that search has to do. Also, you search for sushi, and again, in the past, it was like, here are some web pages, and here's like an encyclopedia article about sushi, which might be what some people want, but a lot of people are just like, I just wanted to order some sushi, I'm hungry. And so these days, now we're able to present background information as well as local information, and have that kind of evolution that goes along as well. We even have things like now these days, the ability to just hum to search. What is that song? What's it from? You hum it and we'll try to locate it for you. Or Google Lens that allows you to take pictures of things, and then we try to figure out from that what are the best search results by analyzing the images. Or it even can help people with things like homework. Take a picture and we understand the equation that's out there and try to help you with that. So one of the key things we're always trying to do is show the highest quality information that we can. And this is through our use of things like signals, and try to understand how that correlates to good information. And it's so important because people are searching for things like vaccine information, or unemployment, or good, helpful information on things that we refer to it sometimes internally as your money or your life types of queries. We really want to understand that that's important to people, and that we've got to get the best information we can to them. And so we really try to make sure the results present the best that they can for that. And so one of the ways we do this is through a lot of testing. We both do live testing, where we will go out there and try, if you will, a new flavor or a new system on how we think we can tie all these signals together, and see how people kind of react to it. The other thing is that we have over, I think, 10,000 search quality raters. They're in almost every state. I think there's one state they might not be in the US. They're also around the world. And their job is basically to read through this manual that explains how to go through and rate search results. So everybody starts from a common baseline, and anybody can read that manual, by the way. We make it available for anybody who wants to read through it. It's like 170 pages long. But we say, look, go do this search. Here on one side is how we're currently ranking content. Here on the other side is how this new proposed change, this update that we think to how we rank content might help. And they go through and they let us know, well, it looks like this change you're proposing might be doing better, or might be doing worse, or might be doing the same. And from that, we can correlate all those signals, all those things that might not really make sense to a human being, all those things that are designed for, computers to understand, and figure out how they correlate with what human beings find to be relevant, useful, authoritative information. Really important, by the way, these raters never, any of their information goes through and then becomes how a page itself might rank. It's not how it works. It wouldn't even be possible for us to do something like that. There are trillions of pages that are out there. So you couldn't have everybody review every single page and then try to use that somehow, especially when there's new pages that are always being made. It's more like, I like to say, like how if you go into a restaurant and afterwards you get a card and they say, how was your meal? You say, well, it was a little too salty, or this is a bit cold, or I love this sort of thing. You don't go into the kitchen and then start cooking it up, but the feedback comes back to the people who are trying to produce the food for you, if you will, and they understand, oh, right, okay, I thought this was a good recipe, but it looks like we maybe need to make it a little change because it's not providing what people are looking for. That's what the raters do. There's sort of that human overall feedback mechanism for us, but they don't rate individual pages in terms of how we will actually rank them. And so we use this kind of testing, this kind of feedback, so that we can keep up with things, and things also, make sure that our systems are keep developing for authoritative information, and also that our systems are able to keep up with a lot of the changes that are happening. So when we started with coronavirus in 2020, it was really like, what is it? And it's just starting to spread, and we're just starting to hear about closures. You're getting into November, and now we have statistics and overviews, and we're changing the pages to try to get people to the most relevant information we can from there. And that's one of the other challenges that we face with our systems, is that on any given day, we estimate about 15% of the queries are entirely new. No one's ever done them before. And people sometimes say, well, that can't be possible. How could you have so many? But coronavirus is one example of that. We have gone from, how do I get tested? Who was even searching for COVID-19 tests, right? Who anticipated that would have ever been a thing? Then it does become a thing. And then it becomes a thing with a city near, or the words near me, or waiting times, or which are the best, and all those variations. And once you've gotten through all that, now you start getting into things like vaccine information, or things like bubbles, or not necessarily new queries, but huge spikes in things like sourdough bread, as people were trying to learn how to adapt or do all these things that we had never anticipated before. Another example is any kind of time there's a sporting event, people are going to constantly create entirely new searches that have never happened. And in the very moment that they happen, because they've just seen something and they can't believe it, and they're trying to understand more about what they just saw. And we have to have systems that are able to automatically be able to react to that and try to find the best and yet authoritative information to show them in response. A few more things. We try to ensure that people can succeed online, that creators that are out there producing websites and other kind of content have all the support that we can provide to them. So we give extensive tools and tips. They're free for everybody. That's really important for us, that it's not a case that you can pay for support, and if you pay more, you get more support. It really is a level playing field, that everybody gets the same kind of support out there, and we put a lot of resources into doing that. But then we also don't show everything about how search works. People will sometimes say, well, it's a black box and nobody understands what's going on. We publish huge amounts of information about how search works and the basic principles that are behind it, both from generally understanding how we rank and show content to what people should be thinking about. But we also have to deal with the fact that there are people who are actively trying to exploit any loopholes that they can find. We blocked 25 billion spammy pages per day that included things like malware, phishing content, and so on. One of the things I like to say is, you want to understand what we do to try to protect search, especially with the scale of spam that's out there. Go into your spam folder. If you use Gmail, or if you use any kind of email service that's going to have a spam folder, go into the spam folder and you'll see the stuff that's being prevented from really making your email unusable. That is what we have to deal with in terms of web search on a very aggressive basis, where people are constantly doing that as well, and that we're working to try to show the best that we can. There are some cases where we will remove content if it makes sense to, if it's highly personal information, in certain cases, if there's legal removals, if there's violations and spam, or if a website owner does that. So sometimes people say things in search and they're like, this needs to come out. Typically, we're not going to remove web content just because it might be objectionable in some way. We really try to understand better how to build systems that understand, well, that was objectionable and it wasn't a useful response. How do we figure out a better way to show the best information overall as we can, so that we're improving it for a range of queries? But then you do get some cases where, especially in some of our search features, we have more specific policies that will come into place that allow those kinds of removals. So, of course, legal removals, if we've got local law, we're going to be following that. And then we have search features where we're showing information maybe more proactively. We don't want to, in these kinds of places, have people perhaps find upsetting content. So we try to do things like with autocomplete. The purpose of something like autocomplete is really to save you typing. That's all it's trying to do. And it does save a ton of time for people who are doing that sort of typing. It's not meant to kind of surprise you with something that might be violent or gory or sexually explicit or so on. And so our systems are automatically trying not to show those kinds of predictions. But if they do, and they get past our initial systems, then we may remove them according to the policies that we publish. And that's it. Lastly, for the presentation part of it, again, there are lots of search resources you can explore on your own. Our How Search Works site, How Search Works if you're a web administrator, our SEO guide that'll help you in terms of how is my content perhaps better optimized to be showing within Google, techniques, our Search Console tool that anybody can use. So the resources are there that you can follow with it. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Danny. I feel like I learned so much just by listening to you. Also, I'm a little hungry. Sushi, pancakes. Just made me a little hungry. Danny, it looks like we have some questions in the chat. So the first one is from Ron. Ron asks, does the order of the words matter in the query?
Sometimes it does, and you can see this because if you flip the orders around, you may get different results. So like if you search for engine search, you're probably going to get something a bit different than search engine. Because sometimes it makes a difference, especially if we can detect. I mean, we're usually going to try to match things that have the words you entered, things that have the words in the order that you entered, if there are those sorts of things. If you were to enter a whole series of words and there aren't pages with those whole series of words, then we can kind of understand, well, the order probably doesn't make so much of a difference in that regard.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense to me. Okay, Kat asks, why do I see far fewer search results now than I did a few years ago?
You shouldn't. Perhaps you should see more, but I don't know if you mean in terms of, am I seeing counts that are less, or if you mean I'm seeing less on the screen itself. A few years, I'll take the counts. The counts probably shouldn't have changed. And they're kind of rough estimates anyway. So, there tend to be more content. So I would be surprised if that was going down, but it could happen. What you might be talking about, as I'm kind of guessing, is, well, I used to get 10 web results and now I'm not getting 10 web results. And actually, you really should still be getting 10 web results, but you may be getting other information in addition to that. Or if we're not showing 10 web links, and I really do think we still should be doing that, but there may be occasions where we're not showing a web link because we're showing an image carousel, let's say, and that's providing multiple ways to get to different links as well. And the main purpose for any of these kinds of changes is really because we have systems that are figuring, in this case, it's probably helpful if we're going broader, we're showing something beyond just a bunch of web links. That's the whole reason why it may happen. It's not always going to be perfect. But as you saw with the pancake example, one of the challenges we face is we don't know how to perfectly respond to queries when they can have so many meanings just based on a single word that's entered, much less what the intent of multiple people have when they're entering it.
That's huge. All right, so another question I see here. How would that impact when, I think this is referring to the does the word order matter query. How would that impact when somebody Googles Congressman Sally Smith? Would their knowledge panel show up, or the business profile? How does that change how it shows up? How does that affect things?
So I've seen this happen sometimes where someone has a business profile, but then they get a knowledge panel for themselves. And it would probably be more about what we think the intent is. So if someone is, especially if they actually had a proper business in addition to their congressional seat, if they were to search for them quite commonly, and we think that they're really after the congressional information, that we understand a lot of the ways people search generally and some of the interactions that happen, then we might feel more confident we should be showing sort of the congressional knowledge panel. In some other cases, we might be able to detect, oh, it looks like they're looking for, say, the business information, especially if it was like I'm looking for a phone number or that sort of thing. So it certainly can be dynamic in that way. And there's no easy answer other than it depends, but it's usually depending because we're trying to make our best estimate as to what makes the most relevant thing to show.
Awesome. That's helpful. And it does help. You can claim both. So that's also something that I implore all of you on the call to do. I have another question here from Jacob. Do search results look different based on location? I.e., do they look different for staff here in DC versus how they would for constituents? And I see, Jacob, you're from Minnesota, which is awesome.
Yeah. So it would depend on the query. If someone does a search that's local in nature and there's good local information to show in response, then we may show more local information in that case. So pizza is the classic example. You search for pizza in DC, your results are going to be much different than the person searching for pizza in Minnesota. There may be some common things, right? We probably will show a Wikipedia page about pizza overall, but we understand a lot of people searching for pizza really want to just buy pizza and they want it from local places. So that's why you would tend to get that much of a difference. If you were searching for, a congressional rep, the results really are unlikely to be that different. If there was some really highly local publication that was showing, it's possible that might appear in response, but it's not that likely to happen in my experience. And I say this because I've dealt in some cases where I will be out here on the West Coast. I'm down near Los Angeles, and I'll hear about something in DC, and I'll do these searches like, yeah, okay, we're seeing the same thing. So we're seeing the same thing because there's not a lot of localization that's going on with it. So it really shouldn't be that your constituents are living in a hyper local world that's completely different from what you're seeing when you're in DC.
Absolutely. No, it's so important. You tend to search for the things that are closest to you. So it makes a lot of sense.
And I'll just add too, a lot of people sometimes will then immediately try to go into incognito mode. You can do that if you want. And they may feel like, well, that's going to stop all this personalization or whatever. But as I said, there's not really a lot of personalization that's happening anyway. So you can do it. It won't change the localization aspect that will happen. If you really, really, really want to see what's happening in a particular location to really understand it, there is a way you can do this in Chrome. I think Safari has it as well. It's using developer tools, and it's a bit hacky, but you can go in and you can set up locations, and you can tell your browser, tell the world I'm in this location, and it will bring back some responses there. But which I tend to do a lot when I'm doing some of my debugging, but a lot of times it doesn't really matter so much. So when it happens, it's for things that are really already local in nature.
It's great to know. I don't see any more questions in the chat below, but if you have a burning question, make sure that you put it in the chat box right down below with the blue Ask a Question button. Feel free to ask a question. Danny, this has been so helpful. I know that I always learn so much when I hear you speak and, when I see all your tweets. So it's very, very helpful. And of course, if you do have any more questions and you can't quite get them in the chat box, feel free to reach out to our team, civics-outreach@google.com. We are happy to field any questions now and in the future that you guys might have about search, YouTube, analytics, whatever the product, you come to us and we're happy to get you the answer from experts like Danny or other folks that are in our team's orbit. So feel free to reach out there. I don't see any more questions. I'm going to look at my teammates in our other chat, just looking to see if there are any that popped up there, but I don't see any. So Danny, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. We super appreciate it. Hopefully sometime soon you'll be able to visit us in DC.
Yes, it'd be nice to get back. So I hope everybody's doing well.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Bye.